Oh, ABC, it's easy as 1, 2, 3. All simple as do, re, mi. ABC, 1, 2, 3, baby, you and me, girl. It's like counting girl.
All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I know it's highly anticipated, but we're happy that you guys were able to, so many of you were able to submit questions that you had about the reopening of the school for 2020, 2021. Just a quick overview of what we're going to be doing tonight. I'm going to go into a presentation about what the hybrid plan is, what the model looks like for the opening of the upcoming school year. And once that's done, we're going to get to your questions. What we did for the questions, we went ahead and looked at the ones that were absolutely the most popular, and had those posted. And I think we've got about 30 some odd questions that we're going to be answering. If it's any indication of how much time that takes, I wish I could promise you I don't have an answer for that. I know we did one of these similar a couple weeks ago with the assistant principals, and I'm pretty sure that one was 12 questions, and it took an hour. So not hoping for 3 hours, because I know people want their information. But just as a reminder, if you are watching this and you have friends who aren't able to see it, that's okay. The link to watch this right now will be still viable. You can watch it anytime you want. So just moving on with things, last night, the school committee had to make a really challenging decision. And that decision was looking at the plan. On the plan, you'll see it in a little bit. There's a whole spectrum of options that they could have selected. And what I told the school committee was there is no option they could select that would be the right decision. There's people who want everyone back in school altogether. There's people who want everyone to stay home. And so trying to weigh out those options is truly an impossible and arduous task. And when you look at some of the things that I mentioned to the school committee, which are very true, when you listen to the American Academy of Pediatrics, and yes, they came out early with some of their research, but the reality is we have a lot of children in our district, and we don't know what their home environments are like. None of us know what another child is experiencing. What we do know is that at home is not the best for all of our students. When I say that, that's virus aside. There's a lot of things that happen in people's homes that aren't necessarily positive all the time for our children. And we know children need to be around socially to thrive. And one of the amazing things education always does is our teachers are able to work with our students to make sure they get that nourishment and the social and emotional support that they need. And if they can't provide it, that we identify another group that can. So it really and truly was a very challenging decision for the school committee to make last night. And I think they did a great job. And no one was wrong, no one was right. There's a philosophical belief and a philosophy there. Its philosophy is a very gray area. Ultimately, the decision was to go to a 50% hybrid, to do the 50% hybrid model. So let me just go in and explain a little bit about the plan itself, because just when they select the hybrid model, that does not mean that we can't switch to something else if the virus changes. And it's really important for everyone to understand that. When things shift with the virus, if miraculously it dissipates, we can move right on to the next thing. If things get worse and our numbers climb, then we can go the other direction. And that was a comment that came up last night as well. In our communities, we've had 0 cases in 2 of our communities and less than 5 in one of our communities in the last 2 or 3 weeks. So that if there were going to be a time to try a remote, one of the arguments was this would be the time to try a hybrid. Otherwise, we'd be remote until there was a vaccine and this entire virus was gone. But again, not an easy decision for any of those members to make one way or the other. So let's go ahead and let me get started with not just the decision, but overall what things look like, and some really important announcements. One, this whole concept, no matter what we selected, Chromebooks were going to be necessary, or bring your own device. We know from the surveys where you answered information last year that we had 191 students who did not have their own device. We know we gave out, I think, well over 100 Chromebooks last year. So we actually put in an order for 450 Chromebooks earlier this week. And I think some of you have discovered there's a timing issue with the Chromebooks, and actually the Commonwealth is going to try to make those expedite those orders because I think some of you are hearing that they're not going to be available until February or March. And we got a similar message. It wouldn't be until later fall, early winter, but we'll have to see where that goes. Another big change that's happened was the time on learning. Now, many of you may not know this, but time on learning is 990 hours. That's been shifted for this year to 850 hours for the elementary and 935 for middle school and high school. Basically, when you look at that 850 minutes, that's about 45 minutes reduction per day. And that's time on learning. So again, it doesn't matter if we're remote, hybrid, or fully in person. You have to meet that time limit. So it's much different than what we had in the spring. In the spring, when we were doing this, it was, you're going to go through and you're not only going to have so much time with students. You don't want to go over a certain amount. And that's one of the big changes for that you'll see in any remote model or anything that's done. And the number of student days, it's 180 days. It got dropped down to 170, and I can't tell you how important that is. Those 10 days can be used for professional development with our educators and employees. One, to go over the necessary protocols and procedures that need to start a school year in a healthy way and a safe way so people understand what's expected. We'll also have time tied in there for students to come in for an orientation so they know what's expected. And also, as we all know, again, no matter what format selected, there's going to be an element of remote. And we know we're going to be doing a tremendous amount of professional development, bringing in people who know how to use and implement distance learning really effectively. And so they can teach and work with our educators to help create platforms where students can easily access material. It makes sense. It's less choppy. And again, you'll see here what's changed. Teachers are going to be receiving assignments. They're going to have to be grading students. They're going to be taking attendance. So it becomes interesting. Those of you who are curious about fall athletics, that decision is going to be made soon. At this point, if their students are remote, they're not allowed to participate in any extracurricular. That's not Pentucket related. That's statewide. But we'll wait to see what happens with fall athletics. I'd be honest with you, I don't think that looks super positive. It's not a hard decision to make. We'll wait to hear that from the state. So let's take a look at that reopening plan. So as just a background for this, you can see here all the dates. We know Friday the 13th was that Friday the 13th. That was our last day when students were here. And then we went through the rest of the year and we're just waiting for information. And that when we initially had that, decided not to, when we initially made that decision not to go back to school, that was teachers in 3 days trying to put things together so that students had materials to work on the following week. And that happened for a couple of weeks. Then the governor closed all schools on the 17th. And then on April 21st, that's when we had a modified curriculum. So what happened in the spring wasn't the full curriculum. It was modified. It was a pass or fail based on participation. So it was something very different than what any of us have ever experienced. Graduation, of course, I think went extremely well on the 6th. And then the last day of remote learning was on the 18th. Just in terms of, many of you asked, when are we going to know? Why don't we know? Here, take a look at these dates. This is when we were getting information. June 5th, we got the safety supplies, what we need in order for schools to function. And we ordered $115,000 worth of PPE. It's basically 3 months supply. And we'll have to do 2 more of those. And we also got the initial summer school guidance June 5th. 20 days later, we get the initial fall guidance, which came out in the Globe first, and then we got it right after. And that's where all the 82, 83 of you who helped put together those feasibility studies, that's what you worked off of to see what it would look like in your school if it's possible to do it at a 3-foot distance. So that was June 25th. On the 17th, again, you're talking 3 weeks later, we get a protocols for responding to COVID scenarios. Then the 22nd, 24th, and 29th, more guidance comes our way. And those were all pieces we needed. That's why you got the transportation survey when you did. So it's just a tremendous amount of information that's coming to us later in the ballgame, which is why nobody was able to make decisions one way or the other. So let's talk about transportation. And this is this Ashland County did this. So you can see this is what a bus would look like. You can have about 27 students on a bus. So when we're at a 50% hybrid, that's half the students going. We're able to do that. We can accommodate that. And there's a couple buses. We have to change the routes. But that's a doable feature at 50%. And the 25% we'll talk about in a little bit. And just a thought. It doesn't matter what we attempt remotely. Nothing will replace in-person instruction for students in pre-K through 12th grade. Yeah, absolutely. Many of you have taken online courses on a college level. It's just a very different experience when you're a young adult or an adult taking those courses than when you are developing socially and emotionally when you're trying to do something online. So I know we all expect here high quality of instruction and delivery and interaction, and that at early levels, that is just not going to replace remote. You cannot replace in-person instruction. That is not a debatable topic or a debatable fact when we talk about education. So when we're looking at the models, these are the things that were considered. You have the health, well-being of our students and employees. What are people's home environments like, especially when they're going to be learning, and that home environment becomes an academic environment. If you're like my house, that's 5 people on one floor trying to get all that work done while 2 of us are working and 3 kids are trying, and we know that's extremely challenging. There's academic progress. How do you measure that? How do you monitor that? And how do you support that? And then our students who are in our special education in our district programs, the amount of regression. And I was in a meeting this morning with one of our collaboratives that we work with, and there's a lot of students who struggled mightily. A lot of hospitalizations that took place, and that is not. We know that happens, and we need to find ways around that. So those were the biggest things that we had to consider. So this spectrum really tells the tale. There you can see the goal. We got this virus, and then we get all the guidance from the local, state, and federal governments. But this spectrum, if you walk through this, there's the stay-at-home order. That's the extreme. That's what we have when the governor closed things down. The full remote learning. Full remote learning is our students are at home and they're learning from the teachers. The teachers would all employees would be in the workplace. The 1/4 stage-in. We'll talk about that. We're actually going to implement this. What was agreed upon last night is a graduated plan to bring students back to this point, to the 50% hybrid model, which we'll talk about. The 100% hybrid model, I'll fill you in on. That was the feasibility study that was done by each school with all those stakeholders that were involved. Again, it was 82 or 83 people that were involved in that. And I'll tell you, that was at the 3-foot distance. And we know 3 feet for us created a whole spectrum of problems, including needing to find almost outdoor classrooms for all weather tents, mask breaks and kids going out in the hallway, overflow rooms, many overflow rooms, which would necessitate all sorts of hiring additional staff. And then, of course, the optimal is that normal situation. So this staged-in approach, essentially what you're looking at is you have 11 days of professional development. And for teachers, that's Wednesday the 26th is when they would start. And then after Labor Day, so that Tuesday, September 8th, we already are working on breaking in students into cohorts. So 1/4 of the students would come on Tuesday, 1/4 on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. Those days are essentially orientation days so that students get to understand what is school really going to be like. And if you think about it, if you've been out of your workplace and out of your place where you go to school since March 13th, anything coming back is going to make you feel uncomfortable. So having that full day in school where you're able to walk through what your schedule is going to be, how you're going to navigate the hallways, how often do I have to wash my hands, when can I take the mask breaks, those are all really important. And then the following week is when we start the 50% hybrid cohort model. And that, again, we have families divided up into A and B, and we'll talk about the same families. If they're in the same household, they belong into the same cohort. And essentially you'll see a model here in a second, but it's 3 days of remote with 2 days in person. And then in our district programs, in this approach, those students that are in our special education district programs, they're in there 5 days a week. So again, stay at home order, that is that far extreme where you've got everyone's at home and the students are working fully remote. The full remote learning, again, students are all at home, employees are all at work. It's a full day. This model is not what it was in the spring. It is a full day of school. The state has made that very, very clear. No matter what happens, time has to go in. And everyone needs to follow their schedules. So one of the questions we got frequently about what's going to be different this year in any remote learning, and again, with the 50% hybrid, there's some remote aspect of it. If it's fully remote, there's attendance in all classes if we end up going fully remote. It's a regular school day if it's fully remote, and yeah, because you have to meet that time on learning. No matter what the scenario is, there has to be the full curriculum. There is no essential standards or modified curriculum like there was in the spring, just to figure out how things are, just to figure out how we're going to manage this and get through the rest of the year. This is a full curriculum that's being expected. That's a lot of pressure on the teachers to try to figure that out, and they're professionals. They'll get that worked out, but it's going to take, like that next bullet there, that professional development of learning what is the best mechanism to put that together and deliver that remotely. Assignments, you recall in the spring, there were no grades. It was that pass-fail. Well, now assignments are going to be graded. Grades are going to be given. Infinite Campus is going to be updated. On the elementary level, again, that's a standards-based report card. And so that is going to happen this year. And then there's assessments that have to be done, and those are also going to be done in any fully remote setting. So that is a very, very big difference from what we saw in the past. And this is just an idea of a schedule. Obviously, this is recorded, so if you want to go back and look at this, you can. This is an elementary schedule, and you can see a kindergarten. It's 8:30. Everyone meets together. At 9:30 is an academic block 1, 10:30 academic block 2, and then from 12:30 to 3, the teacher can create small groups where they're meeting, and while they're meeting with one group, other groups might be doing some other pieces. Also important, though, when the students are doing other pieces, again, because you don't want a kindergartner, first, second, third grader staring at a screen all day. It does give them screen breaks, but they have to re-engage. And then if you're in the middle school, high school, you can look through this schedule. But again, there's kind of the whole similar time period where they're basically, if this would be in a fully remote situation, this is what we would fall back to. So the quarter staging, this is in the plan. This is part of what was approved last night. So on Tuesday, that is when you would have 25% come in. This is not a school day. It's not let's sit and learn. It's an orientation about how is my academic environment going to look like. Learning about my mask breaks, learning about where I can walk in the hall, how I walk in the hall, where do I eat lunch, what does recess look like. It is a true orientation. And one of the biggest things, and a teacher asked this yesterday morning, or made the statement, didn't ask, said this is a big entry because for the first 6 weeks, we have to build that sense of community with our students. Our relationships were greatly damaged between home and student and teacher and student and school in March when we weren't able to see them anymore. So the first 6 weeks are critical in helping us form those relationships and create that sense of community. Because when we have that sense of community, we have a good understanding and we look out for each other. And we know what people's needs are, we know what people's strengths are, and we can use those to help support each other. So the 50% hybrid is what was approved. I'll spend just a little more time on this. So 2 days in person, 2 days remote. And you'll see a schedule in a little bit. If you're a family and you want to be fully remote, you have that option. And if you're all of you who are watching, you just received an email probably about an hour and a half ago that I just recorded a message sent out, but it has a survey we need you to take. And that survey is, okay, now that I know and I have an idea of what the hybrid model is, Am I going to take advantage of the hybrid, or am I going to do fully remote? And we need to know those numbers so we know how to best guide and support all of you. So if you could make sure you take that survey, that would be very important. But for the 50% hybrid, families can decide that their child's going to stay at home for all 5 days. And again, we're going to be following the schedules. If you're in the middle school, high school, you're just going to follow that right on through. And again, we've said this before, if you're in a district program in our special education, then that would be full attendance for all 5 days. So you'll be able to go back and again, hit pause on the video when you look at it, you can see the schedule. But essentially, if you look at Monday, the bottom row is what the teachers, that's prep for the teachers all day. They are going to be building remote content because what happens on Monday, everything gets sent, students are working on remote content that day. And the teacher's setting a curriculum for Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday for those students who are remote. It is not feasible for a teacher to do both in-person instruction for a full day and do the remote instruction as well. So that remote, the students who are on remote, so if you go to Tuesday, cohort A is got a full day of school. Cohort B is at home working on what the teacher had prepared for what the content the teacher prepared for that day. And if students have questions, they're going to have to email. The teacher will not be available instantaneously. And what's purposefully done in this model, if I'm on remote and I'm on cohort B, when I get to Wednesday, I'm now in person. So questions I had, I can ask that very next day. That's one of the reasons why we staggered this AB as opposed to AABB, because that's one of the big reasons. The other big reason is if you go AA, if you go to school Tuesday, Wednesday, the teacher's not going to see you again until the following Tuesday. It's a lot of time off. So that is staggered. So if my child assigns to cohort A, my child's going to be going to school Tuesday and Thursday. If it's cohort B, my child will be going Wednesday and Friday. And we'll send that information out to you. But just it's a key pieces here just to remember. If your child's remote, they're going to have things to work on that day, and it's going to take a good amount of time for them to do. But they're going to be in school the next day. And for that Monday, that's a lot of work the teachers have to prepare. That's why they're having that day to get prepared for their remote content. And they'll I'm sure be reaching out to a lot of students who might be struggling. If you decide that you're going to be purely remote, you'll have Monday and you'll follow through on this curriculum. You'll have the same curriculum. You'll just be following through. One of the pieces of this is that I'm going to use a simple. If on Tuesday the teacher decides they're going to be, I've used this several times, they're going to be teaching how to add single digits, then that's what's done on Tuesday. It doesn't matter if you're cohort A or B. That's the lesson that's being done. On Wednesday, if the plan is to do double digits, even if you were remote and doing single digits, when you're in person the next day, you might do a quick review of single digits, but then you're moving into double digits. And if you were in person on Tuesday and you're doing single digits, on Wednesday, you're remote, you're moving on to double digits as well. And again, that is a big part of the rationale for that is because we have to cover the full curriculum. And that is the only way to do it. If things were repeated, you would not be able to get through the full curriculum. You'd only get through half. So I mentioned this, but that remote in the hybrid model, the remote is not alive. It's not live. So we are not going to have teachers broadcasting out of their classrooms with students in front of them to other students' homes who are remote. There's a whole bunch of legal ramifications for why we're not doing that. I think that probably makes sense to a lot of you who have ever, if you remember being back in a classroom, the interactions that happen between students or even with the teacher. And so that's not going to happen. So there's not going to be live. Everything would be what they call asynchronous, or what I just say, recorded. And it might be recorded on Khan Academy. It might be recorded for another website. So we know that Google Classroom is going to be used in grades 3 through 12, and Seesaw will be used in pre-K through 2. And there's features and add-ons and things like that can be used. There was actually one of one of the reading specialists in one of our schools sent me she's been taking this professional development course, and it's really cool things you can do on this. Actually, some of you had sent me and asked if we were going to have online, be able to use things like Eureka. And yes, we'll have access to a lot of online materials that students will be able to use to help enhance that opportunity when students are learning remotely. And again, families have that opportunity to be fully remote. And we always, the specialists will be going around and they'll be able to modify their content, because there's some courses we can't run inside. PE right now is not allowed to be run inside. Band, chorus, those are all courses that have been restricted. That can be done outside. I think 12 feet is the distance there. So some of those have to be modified, but that's where that hybrid. So that is the one they was voted on. 100% hybrid was not approved. That's the 3-foot approach between students. The 50% gives us at least 6 feet. And there were issues with the 100% hybrid. Some students could opt to be fully remote, but we know we would have staffing issues, space issues, and we'd have these overflow classes where students wouldn't be in front of the teacher. They'd have to be somewhere else with a whole bunch of other students or in individual spaces. And we don't have spaces in all of our buildings for that. And 100% normal, well, that's the ideal. That is what we're looking for. So again, the 50%, what we will be looking to do is the professional development will happen for our educators on September 8th. Doesn't count as a school day. We'll have a quarter of students come in. You'll be told you'll be told who you are, what day to come in. A quarter of students will come in that Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and it's a full day. It's orientation. We'll run buses, and that's how things would start for students. And on the following Monday, which is the 14th, that's when we follow this hybrid. And again, you will know far in advance what group you are, what days you're coming to school. So that's an overview of the plan. And again, in the email I just sent out to you, you have the whole list of, you have a link to the document of the plan, so you can go ahead and take a look at the plan. The calendar adjustments we talked about, when things would start, that's what I just explained. The professional development, and you can see one of the most important ones on is the third bullet down. One of the big reasons why in-person is so important, not just for now, but at any time, is because teachers are educational professionals, and they also are mandatory reporters. But they're great at assessing students and finding out who needs help and how, and they know where to go to help make sure they get that help. So because we know some students have experienced a lot of trauma, stress, anxiety while they've not been able to be in school, and now all of a sudden they are returning, that's going to be one of the focal points of what we'll be looking at. And again, those were just the most important considerations. Again, you have this on video, so you can go ahead and look at these again, but that's what was taken into consideration. So now we're going to move to our panel. Let me get a quick drink here. We're going to go to our panel. So we're going to get into your questions. And at the time, we didn't know it was 50%. What we knew was that you were going to be asking questions about how did you feel, what were your concerns about coming back? So it's coming back in the fall. So what we're going to do now, we're going to bring on our first guest. And our first guest is our lead nurse, and that is Ms. Ann Brady-Lozier. Ms. Brady-Lozier, how are we doing today?
Hi, very good, very good. Thanks for having me on.
No, trust me, our pleasure, our pleasure. Now listen, I was going through these questions. We got a lot of health-related questions. And I know, so we've seen a lot of each other this summer. I know you've been helping out with the town of Merrimack. And I also know you've been training groups of teachers. You've been training me and some of our staff who are working. Talk to us just first a little bit about what training, what have you been doing?
So I really spent a lot of time keeping an eye out for all the guidance that's coming from the state. As everyone knows, it's been coming in drips and drabs, and some of it changes. So it was just really important to keep up to date with the most up-to-date guidance, so we know what we're doing. The first bit of training was just for the staff returning to the office of the central offices, the summer staff, so they were well informed about what they should be doing to keep themselves safe. And then there was some training for the summer students, the students that were going to be seen interacting with some staff over the summer. Did some training for that. And now we're kind of ratcheting it up for the return of school and making sure we do our best and are safe and healthy when the kids return to school.
Yeah, and I'm going to thank you, because I know when things come out, you've even, so I see it, and then you'll point out things that have come out in the guidance that I may have missed, and I just want to thank you.
You're very welcome.
It's very helpful to have multiple sets of eyes so we don't miss important information. Okay, so you ready to get peppered with some questions here?
Yep,
All right,
ready.
So this was a variation of one of the most popular questions. So we've seen this in our hotspots area recently, in Georgia, Florida, Texas, where a student or employee ends up with a positive test. So what exactly is the protocol if there is a positive test for a student or employee?
So to start, this is not new. There is always reportable illnesses that the Department of Public Health gets involved in: pertussis, measles, chickenpox. There's a protocol. So this is going to fit into that protocol that we already have in place. This is not new. So the process is typically the Board of Health, the local Board of Health, finds out that there is a case, and then they do the contact tracing. The Board of Health will ask the person or the parent of the person that is diagnosed with COVID, who are their contacts, and the school will be a natural contact for that student. So the Board of Health theoretically would reach out to the school as a contact person. Now, the Board of Health, there's a process, and sometimes it takes some time to do that. So the state has also recommended in their desktop guidance from July 17th, and anybody can Google that, the state desktop guidance, and they can see that they're encouraging parents to notify the school should there be a positive case.
And I know this isn't a question that could ask, but I know it's a question or it's something I'm going to ask you, because I think I know the answer here, and I think it's important for people to know this.
Okay.
If a student does test positive, we don't know about it, right? The Board of Health isn't going to come to us and say, hey, you have a student in 5th grade who tested positive, right? That is it's only that we can only get that information from the parent. Is that correct?
Correct. That right now, that is the process that they're assuming will take place. Now, the parent very well may mention they're in this class and develop contacts that way, but there's not a direct line to the school.
Okay.
From the Board of Health.
Right. It's always, and I know we stay in close communication with the Board of Health. They've been fabulous to work with. And again, a small community like ours, they're usually quick to help out and let us know what's going on. So another question that came up, people were curious, there's all different types of scenarios. Can you walk us through some of the scenarios, and I just put down, if there was a cluster, what is it that's supposed to happen, and what happens to the school, what happens to the, similar to the last one, but slightly different, because we're talking about more than one.
Right. So part of the purpose of having only half the kids come to the school is that you now develop a cohort that is smaller than the entire class. So the students will be kept as this cohort for as much as the day as possible, so they'll have very little interaction with other students. Should a student become diagnosed with COVID, their cohort, the parents of their cohort will be notified by the school if we find out there's a student with COVID. So through electronic communication, paper sent home with the student, the principal will decide exactly what that looks like, but the parents will be notified of the cohort that they have been exposed to somebody with COVID.
And I know in the guidance it says something along the lines of exposure is 10 to 15 minutes in front of another person.
Yes.
When less than 6 feet.
Yes.
So if I'm reading that correctly, that means if you and I, well, right now we're miles apart, but if you and I were 6 feet or more apart, I'm not ever exposed to the virus. If you had the virus, is that correct?
Correct. That's theoretic what we're going with, what our guidance from the state is. In the desktop guidance from July 17th, it does say students in one classroom, because of the length of time they're sharing with the other students, the rest of the students in the classroom would be considered exposed.
Sure. Yeah.
Because of the length of time.
Absolutely.
And the likelihood that they have come within less than 6 feet, possible, because the possibility they came in less than 6 feet.
Yeah, and I want everyone to understand this as well. And that is when we talked about this last night in the school committee meeting, that if a student in a classroom did test positive, that we would look to ask and have that entire cohort quarantined, just to keep eyes on to see what was going to develop. Because while we are going to be 6 feet apart, it's really hard you don't know. A student could come within, any number of situations, not to mention the middle school or high school, where students will be, they'll be moving, and they might be moving down hallways far apart from each other. But as I recall my middle school and high school years, oftentimes when I was told what to do, oftentimes I did, and sometimes I didn't. So we're going to have to keep an eye on that as well, because that does, if we start going inside that 6 feet for more than 10 to 15 minutes, then that would be that exposure. So I know when we talk about looking for signs of what a symptom is, and I know parents are actually they're the first ones who are supposed to screen the students before they even get on the bus or they're on their way. But so if there is a symptom of this virus, do they have to go home? What is it that they're going right home? They're going home. What happened?
They do. They have to go home. We would love to have parents make sure that a student isn't exhibiting any symptoms before they come to school. Say middle school and high school might have to change their routines a little bit. It's not unheard of for a middle school or high school student to actually not see a parent in the morning. Parents might leave before the student even wakes up, and they might get off to school on their own. Parents might want to touch base more regularly with students if they're not feeling so well, and encourage them, if they're not feeling well, if they're exhibiting symptoms of illness, that they should not come to school. And there is a specific list of symptoms, and again, that is actually in the guidance from July 17th from the state, and we will also be publishing that in the future to parents of what to look for.
And as I recall, one of the things we have to do, and you're over at Sweetser, where you're based out of, but one of the things we have to do, even within a school, if a student does have a symptom, they go to a separate space. You tell me just a little bit about that.
Yep. So there will be what we call a quarantine room in every building, and that that student will be kept separate, monitored until the parent or somebody can come and pick up that student. So they're kept safe, and the other students will be kept safe.
That is very good to know. And this next question is one that was tossed around in the beginning, and I'll put it up here, but I'm going to mention to you, there was one point, and I know we'll have Mr. Danforth and Mr. Haddon on a little bit, but there's one point we were having a conversation about buying these really expensive screeners. So students were walking by, it would flag people over a certain temperature, and then we heard something quite different. So a question to you, will there be temperature screenings?
No, for a very short time, we thought that was a good idea. And then the guidance came down that it's not going to be effective. Teachers are really good. They know their students. They will know if the student is not feeling well. They will be able to send that student to the health office. Students will be walking with actually another adult to the health office. I have to double check the ages what that guidance is, but I know it's definitely for the elementary. So we'll be notified that a student is not feeling well, is coming down to see the nurse. So no, there are no temperature screenings. We would really like to have parents before school make sure they're feeling good. If parents want to take their temperature before coming to school, that's great. We're just not going to be doing mass temperature screenings at the school.
And I know we've read, I think between you and I, we've probably read hundreds of different health releases from, doesn't matter if it's a Harvard group or whatever groups they may be, but there's always, I think there's a parent checklist to do before your kid goes. And one of them is to take your child's temperature.
Yep.
Right? And so I just encourage anyone who's looking, if you're a parent, that we know that ibuprofen drops a temperature, and sometimes you have to get to work, and because your kid might have a flu, and it might be a 24 hours, so you give them ibuprofen. This is not a time or a place to do that. And it just looking at your kid, checking to make sure they're good before they hop on a bus is really important. And honestly, for us, we would really appreciate if there's an inkling that they're not feeling well at all, just to be cautious and keep them at home for that day. Remember, in a 50-50 model, they'd be able to still receive that remote instruction. They would have access to that. So another big question that comes up, we have lots of mask questions. And this wasn't a question, but I got a couple of these emails sent. So I'm going to, before you get started, I want to make this point. I got a lot of questions about shields, the shields that cover the full face and not a mask, because with a shield, some kids felt a lot more comfortable with the shield than the mask. But I am told that the way droplets come out and that the shield is not allowed, is not appropriate if it's by itself. You can be worn with a mask, but not the shield. So I wanted to answer that. So a couple people asked that question, but that's an important thing to know. So tell me about these masks. Does everyone have one? What are these mask breaks, and how long am I supposed to have between all these breaks?
So first of all, I should just make sure everybody knows that the school committee passed last night that pre-K through 12th grade will be required at Pentucket to wear masks. I have been making note of small children out in stores and that kind of thing. They seem to be doing fine with them. I've been quite impressed that these little ones kind of are not even realizing they have a mask on. They seem to be getting pretty used to them. The preschool is a very short amount of time, so that's not really too much of a concern. They're there a little over 2 hours. So we all know that we need a break from wearing a mask. It can be very tiring. I think the mask breaks will fit in kind of very naturally to the elementary school. The mask breaks would likely be around snack time in the morning, then a mask break around lunchtime, and then likely a break in the afternoon. Maybe they have some extra outdoor time, that kind of thing. I think it will fit very naturally. Because we're doing this 50% hybrid, they can do mask breaks in the room and maintain their 6 feet of distance. That will be possible. Now, would I recommend that they have a mask break during singing? No.
Right. And I'm glad you mentioned that, because that is one of the important things I heard and I've read plenty of, that the mask break, when we were looking at the 3 feet, you have to be 6 feet to have a mask break. So you could keep half your students in the classroom, the other you have to go somewhere else. And here we're going to be in a situation where they could do a mask break. But you mentioned this a little bit earlier, and I'll tie it to this. Having a mask off the entire day is not okay. Because if you have that mask off, that's droplets going off continuously versus taking it off for a quick break and then putting it back on. All the droplets would stay in the fabric. There'd be such a small percentage. Versus the no mask is, as you mentioned, that is problematic. That's very true. So and of course you work again at pre-K through 2nd grade is the main building you're at most of the time. So with the little one, you definitely will see that all the time.
Right.
So look, I can't thank you enough. I know I could probably sit here and pepper you with all sorts of medical questions, but I think those were the big ones that came in, or those were the big areas that came in. So I'm going to put you back, and maybe we'll bring you back if there's another question that I need you. But Ms. Brady, thank you. Really appreciate it. All right. So our next guest is going to be our Director of Student Services. It was interesting when we were looking at all these questions. We saw there were quite a few questions about special education. And of course, not everybody has a student in special education. But special education, as you remember from the presentation, was really important in deciding what we were going to do. And I will tell you that the state rightfully has identified, our high needs special education students who are in our programs as just essential students who need to be in the classroom for a whole variety of reasons. But with that, and with all our other students and our questions that came up, I thought Dr. Jarvis coming on would be really important. So here, I'm going to welcome Dr. Jarvis. How are you doing today?
Doing great. Thank you for having me on. This is important stuff.
Yes, it is. And I will make mention that I know you hopped in. You were able to jump in on the school committee meeting last night. Thank you for bearing with us on that. I thought there might be a couple of questions I could ask, so thank you for being available. And as well as, I know you watched the teacher meeting that we had yesterday, or the employee meeting we had yesterday. So it's been a long stretch for you. But so here, a lot of questions come up.
Yeah.
And one of them, this first one's really interesting to me. So we have this thing called FAPE.
Yeah.
And you'll explain what that is. I know
Sure.
what it is. But the whole concept of FAPE, and I'm in an integrated classroom. Here, I'll put the question. I'm in an integrated classroom because of the nature of a disability of students not wearing a mask.
Yeah.
And my child is. So what is it? What happens there?
Yeah. So I'll first preface it all by saying the safety of all of our students is of the utmost importance, and we are going to do some intense planning moving forward for situations like this, but countless other situations we're really trying to plan for so that all of our students remain safe. So when we talk about FAPE, FAPE is an acronym, and it's a legal acronym attached to or built into IDEA 2004. And that's our Individuals with Disabilities Act, our piece of legislation that guides special education practices coming from the federal government. And what free and appropriate education is, FAPE, in this context is about access. So the question really is about access. And so who has access? Does the child that has medical permission not to wear a mask, or receiving special ed services, or does the child receiving special ed services who is required to wear a mask? And so built into that, I'm hearing there could be some concerns coming from parents. Absolutely. So anytime we use the legalese in the way with FAPE or any other kind of legal acronym or attachment to a piece of legislation, we have to look for guidance coming in from the federal government or coming in from DESE, Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. And so what the guidance says for accessing preschool for children who don't require medically cannot wear a mask. I'm trying to say, sorry. And so that means that they are permitted to attend the class. So beyond the access point, what it really drills down to is about communication and information. So communication to families, not divulging students' names, but introduce that there is this access that's available for all children, so kids who are medically unable to wear a mask and for kids to wear a mask, and both have equal opportunity to that. So beyond what the guidance is, it's about sharing that information and planning for that. So there may be some beyond the ordinary kind of implementation strategies that are used for children who have medical conditions who can't wear masks, to involve with distancing, that are involved with cleaning. And so those all have to be untangled and ensured that they are implemented. So those are the strategies I think that we would deal with that. And beyond that, we would look for DESE or the federal government to untangle that.
And what I'm hearing you say is, things have to be communicated. It has to be worked out, situational, and a discussion. And I know this is a conversation you and I often have, that there's just some issues that we've not gotten clear legal guidance from the state or the federal government on. And I know they're struggling with this as well.
Like Nurse Loja just mentioned, the guidance coming in from the state has been coming in on a weekly, sometimes monthly basis, and it changes, and it has changed, and so that requires the district to be informed with that and then plan accordingly as best we can.
Sure, makes sense. All right, another big question for you. So, will all special education students be back full time for all 5 days?
Yep. So within that guidance coming in from DESE, DESE has put it on the districts in the event that a hybrid delivery of instruction is offered to all students. DESE says that districts need to prioritize students, and so in doing so, the district has prioritized students, and those students are students enrolled in district programs. So children who are in district programs are typically in a sub-separate environment.
So let me just you talk this jargon. You talk this jargon all the time.
Oh, sorry.
And I don't. So when you say sub-separate classroom, what does that mean?
Yeah, so that means that it's a classroom outside of the general education classroom.
All right, now you're confusing me even more. Give me an example. So I'm a fifth grade student. What does that mean?
So we have district programs, so language-based programs. We have programs for children with autism. We have social pragmatic programs. We have therapeutic intervention programs.
Okay.
So some of them operate fully sub-separate. Some of them operate in hybrid as well.
So fully sub-separate would be, I'm a fifth grade student and I'm in that program. I have spent a large percentage of my day in a classroom with only a couple of kids, a handful of students. Is that correct?
Yeah, that may be the case. So the regulation in on that is 8 students per classroom unless it's a paraprofessional.
Okay. All right. Okay, so students in those situations, they would be back full 5 days. But
Yeah.
if my daughter has a speech problem, is it with regular ed classroom,
Yeah.
they would not be going for the 5 days.
So they would be following. They would get their special education services.
Yes.
The services would be delivered, but it would be delivered in a way that's both mixed, just like with the general ed population, both mix of remote instruction and in-person instruction.
Okay. All right. So if we move on to this next one, so we have these situations where a student has an IEP. As a teacher, this happened quite a bit. And they might have to get pulled out and go to a separate room. Is that something that that's happening, or is that something that we think isn't going to be working because there's some sanitation issues? Talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. So with that, it's about taking on the available attributes of the guidance that has been delivered. So let's look at the nature of the service. So let's talk about speech and language services. So if it was a speech and language service, that could be delivered in a one-to-one setting, or it can be delivered in a small group setting. And both those settings could be out of that general education 5th grade classroom, as the example you just used. So the same rules apply. So if there's a group there, then we would implement cleaning strategies before, during, and after. So those strategies need to be known, implemented, and overseen to make sure that they are done. So that when there's a new group that comes in, it's a clean classroom or subset.
And it sounds like that's something that's pretty consistent when we hear about playgrounds. And we use this, I'm trying to think where I was the other day, like, you have to wash your hands before. Then you go to the space, or if I'm on the playground, I go play on whatever toy. And when I'm done, I have to wash my hands again, and then that space also gets cleaned. And I think that's a repetitive thing. That's also what we're talking about for recess or for playground use, for lunch. And here you're talking about that separate.
Yeah, and the PD that we have front loaded. At the front part of the school school year is going to be largely developing that and then having safeguard procedures to make sure that it's implemented.
And another really important reason why those 25% orientation days are in there, so students can come in and they can have that experience in much smaller numbers. So we're going to go into, so we know in the spring, trying to do OT, speech, counseling, that was a challenge. That was a challenge. So in this 50% hybrid model, how do we see this happening?
So occupational therapy and speech, for example, occupational therapy and physical therapy. So those are very unique services that require, in most cases, close proximity. So we do have some guidance in on that, and it would be another whole level of cleaning for in-person instruction for occupational therapy and physical therapy to ensure that the services are delivered at a high level and safety is carried through with the sanitation. So with remote instruction, the challenge is making that robust. That's very challenging with occupational therapy and physical therapy. So we look for more of a consultation kind of thing in working with parents in the way of remote physical therapy and occupational therapy to work with parents as we did in the previous spring to June, and work with parents to help guide them to help with the occupational therapy and physical therapy. Now, I know it's not going to fully replace that, but it's our best attempt in the way of safety, because that's at the front load of all of this, the forefront. And in the way of speech and language services, that can be done more effectively with a remote delivery. And
it takes a little bit longer time to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, if I only have 30 minutes, I only have 30 minutes. It's just.
Yeah, and so I actually had the opportunity to visit a morning meeting at one of our district programs at fifth grade level. And it was all done online, and they participated just the same as it would. And I'm not saying it is the same. I'm not, but I'm saying that it was quite a lesson. It was a lot of energy, and I saw parents there too, and they were a part of that, and it was really nice to see. So we're all supporting each other during this difficult time.
That's what we're going to have to. We're going to have to keep doing it again. I'm always thankful that we're doing. I'm doing this. We're all doing this. But we're in the communities we're in, and as a whole, these three towns take care of each other, and that's something I think we absolutely have to highly value. So, Dr. Jarvis, thank you for your time. I really appreciate it. We'll let you go. I know you had to be someplace. Maybe we'll see you later. If we don't, that's fine.
Oh, good.
Thank you for spending those few minutes with us.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, and I hope everybody stays safe and healthy. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Take care. Okay, so we've heard now from Nurse Brady Lozier, Dr. Jarvis, and obviously one of the things we always have questions about, and you heard Ms. Brady Lozier and I talk about this, where Greg Haddon and Bob Danforth and I, they run the facilities department. We were having this conversation where we were almost made the decision to go and buy these huge machines that people could walk through and you'd be able to tell temperature. And we have no idea how accurate they were, but glad we didn't, because it turned out those are not necessary. But what is necessary are these next two folks. We're going to bring on Greg Haddon and Bob Danforth. Again, they oversee our facilities for our school district. And Greg, Bob, how are we doing?
How are we doing?
Doing all right. Thank you guys for both being here. We had, so in the questions that came up quite a bit, and things that we've heard from all over. It doesn't matter if you're a student, if you're a teacher, if you're a parent, if you've been in one of our school buildings, this time of the year can get pretty hot. I'm thinking of Page, Spaces in Bagnell. There's no air conditioners, and you're sitting there in the sun. Fortunately, this school year is not going to start until the middle of September, so we avoid those August days that caused those issues in the past. But one of the big questions that's come up has to do with, so we know in our facilities that there's not a lot of spaces that have air conditioning. So how do we take care of ventilation? We know ventilation is really important in this We know that fans aren't allowed. So people might say, well, just put a fan in there. You can blow it. Well, fans we know are not allowed. So can you talk to us just in our facilities with the ventilation? How does that work?
Well, basically, every summer, the custodians do their summer cleaning, and they do take part the univent and vacuum the coils and change the filters. So we've done that already. And then we have been working on all our rooftop units. Also, we've changed the filters on those. And our fans, exhaust fans for like bathroom areas and common areas. We have been working on those. We've replaced some. We've tuned them up. We've had belt replacements and adjustments. So, and we do have windows. I mean, the windows will open. Yes. Yeah. A lot of the windows do not have screens. So yeah, we have to deal with that. But
so with no screens, that means it's like I'm outside. It's just at certain times of the year, like I know in my office, even with the windows and the screens, from time to time, I'll have a hornet or two. They sometimes sneak in. Of course, as we move on through September, I think that becomes a little bit less. I did want to mention, I want to thank you. In my prior job, there were these units, and I think we had 80 some odd classrooms, and the facilities folks could only get around to 1 or 2 schools a year to clean out those coils because it's such a labor-intensive task to get done. So I just want to thank you for going through, getting all those filters replaced, cleaning out all those coils so that the air is as fresh as it could be in those spaces. I think that is a big question a lot of people have about what the quality is going to be inside those classrooms. So one of the other questions that came up when I had to get you guys on here to ask, I know a little bit about this, but you guys are the masters. So here's the questions right there, and I think you can see that. But let me just I'll phrase this in a different way, I guess. We know that there's cleaning that's happened. Like I know when the flu comes through, there's like we start doing intensive cleanings and things like that. But I didn't really know until this year what that meant. There's been different. We started using new strategies and things like that. And as soon as you do something new, or something new happens, there's a big concern about what you're using for chemicals and students and teachers and anyone who might be exposed to those chemicals. So can you talk to us first about how is it that you do cleaning? I guess that's the first thing. How do you do cleaning of these buildings during times of viruses like this? And the second thing is, can you talk to us about the chemicals that you use and exposure? What's the risk of my health? I'm an asthmatic. What is the risk of my health?
Well, right now, we haven't introduced any new cleaning products. We've been using the same cleaning products for at least 5 to 6 years now. So that's been the same.
So how do you know then if it's the same product that came in before this virus? How do you know that it works on this virus?
Because we have the safety data sheets with us, and we
MSDA, right? That's what
SDA sheets, and we read them, and the companies that sell us the products will give us more information in how they deal with it and what they recommend for us to do. So, they're a big part of how we buy our products and what we buy for the schools to be safe.
And do they provide training for you to use those things?
Yes, they do. Yeah.
Okay. And
there are 2 chemicals that we've had 5 years experience with, and they're applied with a fogging electrostatic misting machine.
Okay.
And they were sold with the kill claim, which means it was laboratory tested for viruses and other things in a public setting. It's used in hospitals, schools. It's a widespread product. So we've had good results with them. It's a easy, full coverage electrostatic application. It allows us to do a whole room or a wing or a whole school. So instead of responding with that type of system when it's asked for, we're going to be doing this daily.
Every day. Yeah,
Every day.
and this is under 3.5 hours, right? 3.5
Well,
hours.
figure 100,000 square foot building. It'll be 3 hours at least to cover all of that space.
And it will go to all the serious touch points, handles, doors, and like that.
And maybe could you talk a little bit about that, like during the day? How do you see cleaning taking place during the day with students coming in and out of,
we're going to have the day custodian walking the hallways, wiping down the high point touch points of areas, door handles, in and outdoors like that. And they'll be monitoring the bathrooms. We'll have hand sanitizers outside the bathrooms. So if they'll be there too. So, and we'll have the soap in the bathroom. So
didn't we also purchase hand sanitizers for out at the playgrounds or outside or somewhere? I know we did.
Yes, we purchased touchless hand sanitizers for outside for the playground and coming into a building also.
We spent $115,000 on a lot of this stuff, so I know we got a lot of good product that will help keep our students and our staff safe. So
we're well equipped to get started.
What's that?
We're well equipped to get started.
Yeah, and I know, and I think both of you have been so instrumental for years, for starting 8 or 9 years ago, making sure we were prepared, always prepared. And a situation like this comes up, and I know I feel a lot better having you guys leading the charge, making sure we have everything we need. So thank you again. And I think that is great information to have out there, that the chemicals we're using, I think I heard you say, Mr. Danforth, that the same things they could use in hospitals, the vendors that we use, they also, they're vendors to hospitals, the chemical. So as an asthmatic, I don't have to worry about taking in and being exposed to anything. I think it may not be widely known, but that's not legal to do in schools, to use things that might cause any kind of exposure, negative exposure. But I can't thank you guys enough. Thank you so much for being here. If you can hang on in case there are any questions, that'd be good. We appreciate it. All right, so up next, we're going to have 3 different people at the same time here. We're going to have Ms. Puteri, who is the principal of Bagnell Elementary. We'll have Mr. Conant, who is our newest principal, but he's the principal of the middle school, and our school committee chair, Ms. Dina Trotter. So I'm going to go ahead, and here's Ms. Puteri. Ms. Puteri, how are we doing? I think you're on mute. See, Ms. Puteri, I told you, you muted yourself.
Sorry. Hi. Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. And there's Ms. Trotter. And Ms. Trotter, I think, let's see. Did she get frozen or disappear? Oh, my goodness. She disappeared on us. Well, that happened. Oh, there she is. 1 second. Here you go.
There you go.
Ms. Trotter, are you there?
I am here. Of course, my computer shut down to update right when I was.
So for anybody watching last night, Ms. Trotter would tell you she's the chair, and she was running this meeting. And of course, right in the middle of the meeting, or it was even public comment.
Public comment.
Shut down. It wasn't the same computer you're on now. I just want to be clear on that.
It is not.
It was one that you were having to use. And then we're gonna add in here, Mr. Conant. Mr. Conant, how are we doing?
Hello. Great. How's everyone doing?
We're doing wonderful, and I'm very, very happy to see you have your Pentucket shirt on.
There we go.
Now,
wrong one. There we go.
was that a gift to you? Did someone get that to you as a gift?
It was a gift. Yeah,
right.
It was a gift.
You had
My
people
previous school.
Your people from your former district were asking me where they can get you something, because they wanted to make sure you had some good gear. So, all three, thank you so very much for being here. lots of questions. I know DNA school committee chair and parents. I think and then we have 2 administrators on here as well. But here's a question, and Dina, you might want to talk about your experience. I know for me, this was certainly a question that I wanted to see happen. And there's another one that comes after this. It says, interesting, the next one is 3 young children, which I have 3 young children. But my question, and I guess, Ms. Buteri, let's start with you. So how do you see the remote part of learning improving compared to what was like in the spring? So I talked about that a little bit in the presentation, but if you could just talk, what are going to be the big changes?
So I know that it's going to improve tenfold, first of all, because what we were doing in the spring was really teaching and instructing under an emergency situation. So it was really emergency teaching. And although we haven't gotten too much direction from the state, this summer, what we were getting in the spring was, nothing. So we were going week to week, really, with updates and updating, staff, parents, things like that. So we really, I think teachers really did try their best, but there was so many variances with what teachers were comfortable with, what they have worked with in the past. So some teachers were very comfortable using Google Classroom and different online platforms and creating screencastifys, for online instruction, creating videos. And then there were other staff members who had never done anything like that before. So it was not really an even playing field. And I think the big difference now is that we've all had time to prepare. So many of our staff members have participated in professional development opportunities this summer. And then we also have the 7 days before the children come back that all students are going to be, or all staff are going to be participating in many, many different professional development opportunities. And it's all about blended learning and using technology, things like that. So I think that the playing field is going to be even, and that all students district-wide are going to be getting the same quality instruction and experience. And that is very different from what I think children and families experienced in the spring.
Yeah, and I know, like grades, we talked about grades are going to happen this year. Mr. Conan, I have to believe, you're coming out of a massive, massive middle school. And at that time, we know, and I know I said this, I wasn't saying the state wasn't giving us any direction. Initially, no one knew really what to do. Mm-hmm. And so, Mr. Conan, how do you see this playing out, just in terms of what is going to be delivered and how it's going to be delivered?
Yeah, I think the major thing here is that we didn't have in the spring is time. So if you remember Friday the 13th, we most districts didn't make that call till the Thursday night before, and then all of a sudden we're on remote learning, and then everyone was kind of learning on the fly, panicking. There was a lot of uncertainty about the virus at that point. Is this going to be a 2-week closure? Is this going to pass? Or is it going to be more long term? So just for the easing into the year and having those professional development days, I think is going to be huge. I think it allows us to slow it down, make sure we have the procedures and the protocols right. To make sure everyone's safe. It allows us to take a look at some of the social emotional learning that we know lacked last spring. And it allows us to dive in a little bit deeper to some of the software that's available through the Google suite and things like that. And good thing we do have Google, because I can imagine this happening 5 years ago, or longer. I think that with Google's done a great job updating on the fly, which is a little overwhelming for us as educators in the spring. But now since we have more time to look at how the year is going to go, I think it's going to be a much better than last spring.
Yeah, and it's interesting. You're giving us that perspective. You weren't even in this district, so it sounds like what was happening in our district was no different than what was happening in every other district.
No, it just seemed like every couple of weeks a new phase. I don't know how many phases we ended up going through, but it was phase 2.23, phase 3, phase 4. So we went through a ton of different phases, and you just felt like we were writing these plans, and they were out the window the next day or the day after. So it was frustrating to actually have a plan coming into the school year. It's going to be beneficial for everyone, most importantly the students.
And that modified curriculum is also out the window now. We know that because the state wanted to have the full thing. So Ms. Drata, I've got to ask you. You're a parent. You had to be there. Your child was in your house with you. How was that experience for you in the spring?
Well, it was interesting. She's pretty good about working herself, but there were times when she couldn't access the website, couldn't download the papers she needed to, she couldn't print anything to print out to do the math homework. And, we'd have to figure out or have people send us stuff on text.
Yep.
So, or I'd text her teacher and send her work that way. So, and I know a lot of other families were feeling that too, and very overwhelmed with, I have one, but there's people with 3-4 children that had to juggle all this work and these glitches, and it was very overwhelming for everybody, I think. So I'm confident that we're going to get this way better.
and you can tell I led you into a question. I led all of you into a question. It's like a trap here. Here's one. We'll go ahead and read that on the bottom of your screen. So I know, because you just said you had to print things out. Sometimes you weren't able to print it. You didn't have a way to print. I lived that exact same story. And again, I think everyone was being well intent, trying to do what they could. But I would say for parents who have young children in particular at those earlier grade levels, how can we reduce the amount of work that they're required to do? So what Ms. Trotter just said, I think, is a story that can be repeated by most parents who are trying to find any paper, any way they can, or take pictures of whatever it is and send that in. So how do we see, and Ms. Gutierrez and Mr. Cohen, hop in and go ahead and answer this one? I am curious about this.
I can start off. So I think that I can speak to this myself. I have a 3-year-old, and she was in school prior to the closure, and she had 2 Zoom meetings a week, and that was very similar to what I saw at the Bagnell Elementary School. So 2 Zoom meetings a week, and even with the Zoom meeting, I would often have to sit there and help facilitate. Same thing with our pre-K and kindergarten, first grade students. Even with the teacher being, on screen, the parent would often have to be sitting right there. I think that we're going to have so much more clarity this year for schedule, and just the fact that the students are going to be coming in and having that face-to-face time with the teachers. The teacher can, have that small cohort on Tuesday and get the children set up, make sure that they can answer any questions that they may have, get them really set up for that online learning day the following day, and then expect the student to either pass in some work or bring in some work to them, rather than putting that on the parent to have to continually provide teachers with finished pieces of work, finished assignments, things like that. And I can see the parent and teacher communication increasing tenfold as well, just because there is going to be that FaceTime with the students at least twice a week. So I think that's going to be a huge piece. And if we do, I think we probably will end up at some point going full remote, depending on what the virus does. But if that happens, there is a much more structured schedule that we are going to be utilizing, and it's going to be consistent for every student in the district. So it's not going to be, this teacher does 2 Zoom meetings, and this teacher does 3 Zoom meetings, and this teacher does, has office hours with the class on Mondays, and this teacher does 2 days a week. So there's going to be, consistency everywhere. And the schedule, parents are going to know what the schedule is going to be day to day. It's not going to be a guessing game, what the following day is going to look like. So just that consistency, and to allow parents to plan for that, is going to be huge.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something that I think is a really good point. And we talk about, why did we decide Tuesday and Thursday for cohort A, and then Wednesday and Friday for cohort B. And I think this is a great example of that. Instead of having to wait 5 days, if I was Tuesday, Wednesday, and I was remote, I'd have all these other days I'd have to wait before I could send something or get something to my teacher. Whereas now, if I was on Wednesday, if I was remote, I'm going to see my teacher the next day, so I can get the support, or they can print out or whatever it is that they need to be there for me. So I appreciate that response. And here is a softball, but possibly a trick question for all of you. What will be the first day of school?
Is it the 14th? Sorry.
14th.
So do I have consensus on September 14th?
Yeah, it's Monday the 14th. Yeah.
So Monday the 14th, yes, technically is the first day of learning for students, the first day of the 170, is a Monday, so it'll be a full remote day. But the prior week, we're looking at the 8th, September 8th. That is the first day students will go to school. 25% will go to school on that Tuesday. But yes, September 14th is the day where learning will start. And in all honesty, it's going to be the first day that we're going to start, if we stay in this hybrid, if that model is able to stay because things stay as they are. If things shift and we go to remote, it's still probably going to be the 14th, because we definitely need, as I think all of you said, and as Todd and I both have experienced, we need to make sure that there's strong platforms with robust learning materials up on there, so that we're not running into some of the problems that we had. And again, 100% credit to all the teachers for the work that they did, because it was completely on the fly that they were doing things, and it took a couple of weeks for the state to try to figure out what are we going to do. And it's not necessarily their fault either, because we're all waiting to find out what's going to happen. And when we look back a year from now, I'll look at this conversation and say, even then we were still waiting for a bunch of information to figure out what's going to happen. So in a constant state of waiting, I'm going to put you guys in the background for a little bit. I think I know I have more questions for you later, but I don't want to give you all the attention all at once. So thank you right now. We'll have you back in this one, but thank you so much for those answers.
Sure.
All right. So we're going to move on now to, we've got, oh my goodness. Yeah, we're going to go ahead and bring on, I actually had more questions I'm going to bring them back. Sorry, Ms. Buteri, you're coming back. I made, laugh it up, Ms. Trotta, that's fine. So I made a mistake. You have more questions.
I didn't say that.
So I'm going to say, so this was a question that got asked. All these lessons, how are they going to be monitored? And we want to make sure how's that going to happen? Mr. Cohen, any ideas?
I think that the planning days are crucial on Monday. I think that we need to make sure that we're, as a leadership team or as an admin, that we're getting around each team, each content area to check in and just to open up the open line of communication, so we know what's going on in our school building, just like we would anyway in a normal brick and mortar setting. But things that are different than last year again is there's actually time for I go back to that variable, that word time.
But it's and you keep going back to it, and you all have, but it is so critically important that we had those days, that the state gave us those 10 additional days, because we would not have had that otherwise. It would have been 4 days, and that's it, and that's a lot to cram into 4 days if I'm trying to meet students and prepare. So you can't go.
Yeah, so I think that yeah. So time is on our side this time around. I think that just by, I know we got a robust professional development plan to start the year. We'll get through all the safety protocols, make sure everyone's safe, and then we really have an opportunity to really unpack what we learned from last year. And because a lot of positives came out of this, a lot of teachers pushed their capacity, a lot of students pushed their capacities, a lot of administrators. We all have to look at things a little bit differently now from the things we learned last spring. But I think the most important thing, for being monitored is just, having staff, having teachers, get their material out early for parents, early for their students. We have those days on Monday to work on, to plan, hopefully get ahead, just so there's no surprises. So that, so we have, particularly at the secondary level of middle school, we, oftentimes, students are left to be on their own a little bit, but I'm encouraging all students, all parents and families during this time to check up on your students, on your kids. Even in 7th and 8th grade, they're still little. We're all going through this for the first time, so we all need to be in it together. So I think that just opening up communication, getting lesson plans out in advance, and allowing opportunities for families to have open dialogue with their child's teachers as an administration is key.
Well, I agree.
Because as we found out, as we found out last spring, this could change. We could have to adjust some things, but we can only adjust things if we know what needs to be corrected.
Yep, absolutely true. And I think that one other really big point on there is when we talk about being monitored and ensure high quality, we're in a situation where teachers can now have time to collaborate with each other.
Yeah.
And I know last year we had in our districts, Ms. Pateri, you certainly know this, and Ms. Trotter, you were working, your child were working. On the website we had, if you're a 5th grade student, all 5th grade had this one website they could go to, they click on it, was common. And that's great. I mean, and our teachers worked, again, quickly to put that there. Here now, we're in a situation where in a hybrid setting, you could have all 5th grade teachers working, sharing content, so that remote model looks the same. And you can tweak it a little bit for your classes, but they will be they'll be in their buildings, and they'll be able to get materials or think about materials, and possibly might have the same grade levels decide they want to work close to each other, classrooms next to each other, where they can just go back and forth and talk to make sure that they're getting the best results. And we think about assessments, which we didn't do in the spring, that they're going to be able to do assessments and talk about that data and figure out, okay, what do I need to do? Instead of just being me by myself, I have my peers right there that I can go to. I think that's going to be a difference maker as well.
Yeah.
So I know, Ms. Trotter, if we did a good job last night, you'll be able to answer this next question. We have a lot of families, who have multiple children, and they're really concerned that we're in a hybrid, and there's cohort A, cohort B. They're worried that they're going to be split to cohort A and cohort B. So the question: can siblings go to school on the same day?
Yes, absolutely. We are making that so the parents only have to deal with one schedule for all 3 children instead of 3 different schedules, 3 different days. And we're going to try to work on the remote part of it as well, so they're not all on the computer at the same time, kind of staggering their work so everyone's not fighting for your attention and
the
computer.
It's true, and I know we're going to talk about technology later, but I'm glad that message was at least clear that yes, we absolutely, and another reason for that, one is certainly the schedule, and you also have many instances in our community where there's older siblings who watch younger siblings. So if the older sibling is at school and the younger sibling isn't, that's a problem. So as many of those situations we can create where there's an older sibling who's able to watch on those days when they're not in school, that I think helps everybody out. Okay, now it really is time for you to go back into the studio. Wait, where I bring you back later, because I got to go ahead and bring on. So thank you again. You can wave goodbye temporarily. This time it'll be a little chunk of time. Thank you all very much. We're going to go now to Mr. Conway, and I'm going to say this out here. Mr. Conway has been instrumental on staying on top of all of the changes between he and I and Greg Lebrecht. We are on, and Dr. Jarvis, we're on phone calls and these Zoom meetings every single day. And it's not possible for one person to go on to all of them because some of them run back to back. There's overlaps. But he has just been incredibly valuable to us as a school district. And it's always behind the scenes, so he never really gets much of the recognition from our community. But I'm going to bring him on here, and I got a whole bunch of questions. Now, just so you know, Mr. Conway, how are we doing? I think you're on mute right now, but
there we go. Doing well. Thank you for your kind words as well.
Yeah, sure. So I think people should know why you're here. So in our district, and I explained this, if you've come to Pentucket from somewhere else, other places have a lot of they have directors of this, coordinators of that. And in our district, we have the superintendent and then the assistant superintendent. And we have Dr. Jarvis, Director of Student Services. But when it comes to, you deal with all human resources, you have all curriculum and instruction, and you also deal with wellness amongst a whole litany of other things. So pretty much a broad scope of expertise you have to bring to the table. So not surprisingly, because of that scope, I have all sorts of fun questions for you. And I think people know, so when we developed these plans, Mr. Conway was a big part of this, myself, Ms. Trotta, Mr. Wentz, Dr. Jarvis, Mr. Danforth, Mr. Buck. We were all part of making sure we had a plan that made sense. So a lot of these questions, I hope you'll be able to get through here. I think we're not going to take too much trouble. First one, very common question. We have, families, and I know you've gotten some emails, I certainly have, they don't want to send their child because of a health risk. So what happens in those situations? In this hybrid model, what's going to happen?
Yeah, and certainly understand it. Every family is going to sort of come at this from a different direction, and each one of you need to make the decision of what's best for your family. And I have no doubt that many of you are conflicted even at this point. So we sent out that survey today. I think Dr. Bartholomew sent it out maybe a couple hours ago. We have about 480 responses.
Hey, you're going into that second question already. I'll put it up.
Already there. All right. But that is, families will have that option. If you really do not feel comfortable, or you know that your child is not, whether they have a medical condition, you don't want to do that, you don't have to send them. We have a couple different remote options. We talked about those a little last night, and I learned actually today about the specific details of one of them in particular that we've been waiting for months. So basically the options you can run through if you need to keep your kid home, you can choose to participate in our hybrid model, but just do it full remote. Right. So you'd be assigned, if it's a fourth grader, you're assigned to a fourth grade classroom, and instead of coming into school on those 2 days, you actually just stay home and you do all the remote work. That wouldn't have any sort of synchronous instruction with it.
Whoa, there's that term synchronous. People use
okay.
that.
Right, so two terms. We use the word synchronous and asynchronous, and synchronous is live instruction. Like this is synchronous right now, right? What would make it asynchronous is that people could engage and ask questions and so forth. Asynchronous would be if you watch this video tomorrow, that's asynchronous learning for you. So, so that's one option, is you can just participate in that. And that may be a good option for you if you think, well, I'm going to do this for a couple months and let's see where it goes. And maybe at some point you want your kid to join in on the hybrid, or, and that's perfectly fine. That's an option. And that's what you want to indicate on that survey that was sent out. It's very important for us to know those numbers, because that changes the numbers of the kids in the classrooms. Sure. The second option is the state learning management platform. They just released today a couple options. I think the one that best suits us is the Florida virtual school model. So it's the state of Florida runs a virtual school platform, but they have developed a Massachusetts standards curriculum, kindergarten through grade 12. And that includes at the high school, honors level, AP classes, you name it. It's all there, and it's all Massachusetts standards. So that's an option that you could do. We have to pay for each of those licenses, which we're perfectly okay doing. That's not a problem. We'll also be assigning some of our staff to oversee and check in. They'll help you if you're stuck. They're not going to provide you with daily synchronous instruction. It's more you're going to work your way through that virtual platform. It really is. It's a pretty good structure they put out there. I was pretty pleased looking at it.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, it's one of the things, and I responded to an email. A parent had asked, they were trying to decide, should I have my kid remotely? Will the teacher have any contact? And I said, well, really, if the teacher can't do two things at once. Teachers are not going to be able to sit with students all day and then work with students who are remote. That's not possible. So the answer to that was the contact you would have if you decide to do just remote is going to be minimal. It might be a check-in from time to time. Certainly you could send emails, the teacher responds when they can. There's those Mondays where the teacher might reach out. But that it's not nearly as involved as you would if you were in person. But and I said to this parent, I said, look, exactly what you just said. So I started laughing when he said it. We just got this today. And I know you sent me an email that said, I just got this. And I said, me too, at 4:44, I just got this email. And it went over those options. And for people who don't know, there's a lot of, in the states in the Southeast, a lot of states have these virtual schools. So it's a virtual public school. And so students, if there's courses that their schools don't offer, or if there's medical things, students always have had that opportunity. In Massachusetts, that is not something that's common, partially because we're such a smaller state. But in the larger states in the Southeast, these tend to be more common. So it is something we just got today. We're looking at it and need to figure out how logistically we can do it. But it is one of those pieces, like every day that happens, it's new information that we have to take and process.
Yeah.
But it's nice to have potentially a viable option there.
Sure. So that virtual school is definitely a viable option. I got a chance to participate in a webinar today on it, and I was pretty pleased with it. And the third option is parents can always choose to homeschool. The homeschool application is on our website. You fill out the application, but at that point, if you choose to homeschool, you're totally responsible for all of the curriculum, your assessment of your child, and the planning and all that. You're responsible for it. It does need to be approved. My suggestion to families is to actually maybe try one of the other options. Try either participating in the remote option. Try that for the first few weeks in September when we're back. See if that works. If you get into October and you just say, I want to do this myself, then fill it out and we'll deal with it at that point. But that's my suggestion. But if you're committed and you want to do that virtual school with the Florida, we do have to commit a seat to that, a license to it. We have to commit an educator to help monitor that. So if that's your choice, that's more like you're thinking, well, we're going to do this at least for the whole semester, if not the whole year. That's the one I want to commit to. Then that works for you too. So with multiple options for people, and we'll work with you, but we need to know sooner rather than later which one you want to do.
So if you could just a message there, and that, as you just said, that just went out. That was a very recent. Survey that went out somewhere around just before 5 o'clock, I think. So if you got that email, if you could please make sure that you fill that out, that would be fabulous. I can tell you that right now we have 463 responses, and that's good numbers. But we'd love to have a lot more. I know with the transportation survey we had about 2,300. So making sure we have that information would be it's absolutely critical. So thank you, Mr. Conway, for mentioning that. And you're not done because, of course, I have plenty of more.
All right.
Looks like you've already answered some of them. So this is a common one, and this comes up. And I think you and I both got an email about this morning. So because it came up in the school committee last night, if I'm a parent, and I think you got conflicting information today from the Department of Ed on this.
Yeah.
So we're going to give an answer here, and this is going to have to go like a third party for this answer. But when I start, you just asked us to fill out the survey. I asked parents to fill out the survey. Do they have to lock down their decision? I'm going to be hybrid, and I'm going to be hybrid, or I'm going to be remote, and do I have to stay in remote for like eternity for the rest of the year, a month? Do we know what that is yet?
So I think the first option I talked about how a parent may want to have their kids participate in the remote portion of it. That we can be more flexible with, and you might not be able to say on a Friday, all right, I want my kid to come to school on Tuesday. We might not be able to do that right away because we have to make sure the numbers are going to balance. So I think that option gives people a little bit more flexibility to maybe after a little while to change your mind. If, like we talked about, if you're going to choose that Florida virtual school, I think we're looking for at least the first semester to commit to it. If it's elementary school, probably the first trimester, and then we can talk after that. I think one thing we spoke about though is if our plans alter, if we were to go from hybrid to more of a full in-person or the other way back to remote, we could re-engage some folks, and if they want to opt that. But for us, some of these we have to commit staffing to these.
Right.
So there's implications in how we function when people change their mind. So I'll say, if you're really not so sure, that first option might be the best one. But if you're pretty committed to it, one of the second is the Florida Virtual School, FLVS, if anyone wants to look it up at home.
And for those of you who are interested in that, stay tuned from us, because again, we're just reading the information today.
So the one thing that did come up that I think impacts, if you're doing full remote, either one of those options, and we're running after school, maybe by October, November, we're running some after school activities, athletics. The kids can't come to school for those. If your decision is to keep your child home, that's your decision. They can't then come in to the buildings afterwards. And that's straight from the Department of Ed. Sort of surprised me a little bit, but it makes sense, I guess, in the logic of it. So,
yeah. And I think, I know I mentioned that earlier, I'm glad you reemphasized that point. So if we are remote only, if someone decides to do remote only, that they are not eligible for any extracurricular activities.
Right.
So we answered this one. Can we select a remote only option? That's a yes.
Yep.
What about, let's see. So plans for families whose children stay at home. I think we've covered that one kind of as well.
Yep.
So let me see if I can pull one of these up.
Sure.
Or can you talk, I'll try to post something up for this, but in the meantime, while I'm trying to find it, can you talk this a little bit?
Yeah. So, and I think Ms. Puteri spoke about a little bit too about the expectations. What we did in the springtime was emergency teaching. We had some structures in place, but it was meant to be very, very flexible. And, and when you do something like that, you get a lot of variables and with what gets implemented. And that's where we're at. That's not what this would look like if we end up in remote learning. The high school, there'll be 45-minute class sections. Our kids need to be participating in their general time on learning that they would if they were in the building. We've had some reduction in that from the state. They've given us some flexibility, but they're going to need to be engaged. So this is a high school sample schedule. Get it up there full screen.
Oh, sorry. I always do that. I hit the right instead of the left. There you go.
An example of a Tuesday. So on the Tuesday schedule, Tuesday and Thursday, we're going to go periods 1, 2, 3, and 4. And they're going to meet in the morning. You notice there's a 45-minute synchronous instruction block. So kids have to be in class. There's attendance is going to be taking. There's teacher attendance as well. And then there's a 15-minute screen break. And then a 9 o'clock class, a 10 o'clock class, and 11 o'clock class. And just because they sit in there for 45 minutes doesn't mean that they're done. They have 45 minutes of follow-up work to do that they can do in the afternoon. They can potentially do the next day, but they have work that they need to do that's follow-up work. And then in the afternoons, what we're asking teachers to do is giving them a little bit more flexibility, that they use an hour of time where they can meet with small groups, tell kids they need to work together in small groups, but kids should expect in the afternoon to be engaged at least for another hour of learning in small chunks of time potentially. You may not be involved in a small chunk of time for every class that morning, but at least a couple of them would be the expectation. And that's for more direct and small group instruction, facilitating it. I think the other thing you can expect in the schedule, Ms. Puteri talked about it, and when that synchronous instruction is going on, it's going to be far more engaging than maybe what a lot of people experienced before. And that's a lot of our professional development for teachers, using things like Pear Deck and Nearpod, Padlet, which you did to help generate some questions. And there's some other tools we're going to provide people too. So it's not going to be kids sitting there listening to the teacher talk at the screen. There's going to be a lot more engagement. And I think that'll get better too as people get used to it. And a lot of these tools, even if we're not in full remote learning, we're going to be using them in the hybrid. So part of that opportunity in the hybrid is to make sure that if we go to remote, everyone sort of understands how they'll be able to operate. And a lot of them are blended learning tools anyways. And teachers have been prepping for them over the summer, and we'll have a lot more PD at the start when we return in August with just the teachers.
Yeah, and I think you just said that. So teachers have been praying over the summer. So I do get questions from people often. How come teachers aren't working on this now? So there's this misunderstanding that teachers are contractually not working in the summertime. Sometimes they do it on their own for professional development purpose. Sometimes they just do it on their own. But there's no contractual, they're not getting paid to work throughout the summer. They do a lot during the school year. So there is no, if they've gone out and done that on their own, that's a lot of them. Well, trust me, so many of them do, because it's just what we do as educators. But it's not something that we can call and say, hey, we're going to do a PD, but we want everyone has to come in and do this. And that's just on the thing. And we know in that, so on the other slide, and I've shown
You're showing the middle school, high school. So an elementary schedule.
Here's an elementary right here.
And I heard Ms. Trotta earlier reference this as well. So for the elementary kids, we recognize that whether it's the number of devices you have or that maybe there needs to be some adult support here and there, we're going to try and stagger it by grade level. There's nothing we can do to make it perfect for every family, but we are trying to stagger it by grade level. Basically, they're going to have in the morning, they have a morning meeting, and everything for the elementary kids are in half-hour blocks. Having them sit there longer than half hour, every bit of research says it loses total effectiveness. So we've got to have some breaks in there, screen breaks for them. So a half an hour of direct morning meeting time, which is organizational, social, emotional learning, and it also might be able to establish some of the academics. And then each day there's 2 different academic blocks. So the first one would focus on English language arts or social studies, and the second one on and then the second day would be math and science. And basically that's how that would work. And then in the afternoon, similar to the high school, sort of a broad stroke of time where there'd be an hour a teacher would have to devote to small direct instruction to smaller groups, probably focusing on math or social or English, depending upon what was taught that day. You might see our paraprofessionals involved in that in the afternoon, taking a group. And for some of the older kids who can facilitate a group, maybe even by themselves, do some group work, they might have some of that assigned to themselves in the afternoon. So kids can expect that in the afternoon, they're going to come back after their lunch and movement breaks where they can engage with that. In addition, in this remote learning, elementary specials get built in on sort of a rotating basis a little bit so that kids can participate with that too. So
I have that somewhere.
That's all right.
I may have.
Yeah.
All right.
And that'll rotate through. Yep.
And I think one of the important pieces of all this is that, and it's, I know we have put this together in a period of time. We have a lot of thought process, a lot of guidance. We've had to consider all these pieces. But there's still a lot of time to go before students come in. And we're going to get, as we think through some of these pieces, as we actually physically walk through what the schedule is going to look like, we're going to come up with possible alterations. So what we're showing people now is what our thought is at this time. And when we talk about like in the afternoon with the high schools, that'll be more detailed as we get there. But we're not to that point yet. We have a good framework. And that's really what this is. So I think that's just important for people to understand when they're looking at the plan. There's not all details are in there because there's so much that's going to or potentially will be adjusted. Let's see. So I think I think you just pretty much answered this one. The motivation one is an interesting question there. What do you have to say about that? Are kids going to be motivated here? I know there's 2 reasons why they would be if they're remote compared to what was in the spring for sure.
Yes. Well, they have to attend, and we have to take attendance.
That's one of my reasons.
Decisions are made by those who show up, right?
Yeah.
And so that's going to be important. And if kids aren't attending, we have a protocol that we'll go through where we'll use support staff, whether it's building administration, guidance, and so forth, to support the teachers in trying to get the kids to be engaged. The other factor, I don't love this as a motivating factor, but kids will be graded. I despise thinking that kids work solely to get an A. To me, that defeats the point of school. The point of school is to learn and to have some intrinsic motivation. But we know some kids are not intrinsically motivated under the current circumstances. So some grades provide that intrinsic motivation. And for other kids, grades provide no motivation. And they need something that's interesting and engaging. And this is the dilemma that teachers and parents face all the time. You have to find different ways to engage different kids. And that's universal design, finding different ways to think that if I taught, I'll take your earlier example, if I taught double-digit addition, what are the different ways that a kid can show me that they know the objective? And giving them those varying opportunities to be able to do that. And that's some of the PD in the beginning of the year too, especially when we talk about project-based learning. There's nothing more UDL, Universal Design for Learning, than project-based learning. Not projects, but project-based learning, where a kid can say, all right, I'm supposed to show you double-digit addition. Let me show you a rap video with some graphics that I made to show you I know how to do this. That may motivate someone.
Yeah, there's a lot of different ways. So that's a great answer. And those were the two things I think as well. And not surprising, I think you and I see eye to eye on the a purpose of education was not necessarily to get the A's. It was to really improve yourself and learn how to think critically and how to go out and be a productive citizen. So let's see. Will virtual hours be increased similar to regular school hours? And I think I mentioned that a little bit. We know we've decreased what's required, but the answer to this one, far cry different than what we had in the spring, right?
Yeah, and I think the dilemma always is though it's the independent work, right? So we can assign the 45-minute blocks, and they have to show up for that. Kids are going to have work they have to do independently of that to meet the time on learning requirements. But one assignment may take one student 10 minutes, and it takes a different student 40 minutes. So it's always hard to sort of predict that. And I think for parents of younger kids, and even for older kids, if it's becoming burdensome and there's too much, you need to communicate that. And the teachers will work with you to decide the right way. For some families, it was, you heard the stories and people shared them already. Their kids were done pretty quickly and they had nothing to do. And others were like, this is too much. I can't handle this. This is overwhelming. And even in my own house, we had two very different experiences.
That's I think that story, as you said, is
in a different district, two very different experiences.
Yep. So technology-wise, I can feel this one, I think. So will every student get a Chromebook and when? So this is a plea right now. Bring your own device is where the district's currently is. We've been trying to bring in more Chromebooks. But we know from the spring that many of you have your own devices. But we also know that some of those devices your children were using at home were desktop computers. They weren't laptops that were mobile. So will every student get a Chromebook? So we want every student to have a device. It may not necessarily be a Chromebook. Here's what we're looking at. 450 Chromebooks were ordered. When they get here, that will help. Those 450 are actually part of our one-to-one that we were trying to do for 7th and 8th grade. So all the middle school would have Chromebooks. So while we're waiting on those, we know we already gave out 100. And so everyone in the spring had what they needed to do fully remote. When students come back, we would like them to have a device. If they have a device at home that they can bring in, they can use that. That'd be wonderful. For families that don't, we're going to have to empty what we have in all of our schools between iPads and any Chromebook carts or whatever carts there may be, try to meet that. And there'll be something that goes out later about those devices. But obviously, when we go into remote, if people already had them, we're good. We're going to start off on that first Monday on the 14th. It's going to be in the 15th when students come in. We're gonna need that data before that so we can make proper accommodations for those people. So, Mr. Amos-Cowie, is this decision for the hybrid going to be revisited?
It's basically revisited every day, really, when we think about it. And I think there'll be some metrics that the state will be providing all school districts across the state to sort of look at when you may need to shift from what you currently do. And I think we're aware of that. You certainly are. It's probably what keeps you up every night. So this is a decision based on, the current data that's in front of us of the 3 towns and of what we know we can do. And that's what we're acting on. And if the data changes, then I think we're in a different position at some point, which is why we built pretty solid multiple plans. We built a remote plan, we built a hybrid plan, and we have concepts of what it would look like if we were to expand that hybrid and bring more kids in. Some things we need to work through at that point, and I think it's that color-coded spectrum of return plans.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
that's the intent, is to sort of have the ability, all that's in front of us, and we could shift either way on that spectrum based on what we have. And I know Ms. Brady Lozier had spoke about, well, what will happen if, and actually of all the guidance I think we've gotten from the state, that may have been the most precise, specific, and helpful in having us deal with situations. And I know you, ultimately it's your decision about some of these things. And I know you when it comes to the safety and well-being of kids and families and staff, that's paramount. And that's where you'll anchor your decision in the end. So.
Absolutely. Well, I appreciate that comment. It's true. It is. Not a lot of things keep me up, but yes, I'm always looking at those numbers. And right now, we're fortunate we get them. We have great relationships with our towns, so we get some information from them. Because when you look at the county numbers, we're impacted by some of the bigger, like Lawrence and Lynn. We're impacted by their numbers, and that's not necessarily reflective of our towns. So we're going in here. So this was a question that came in. If we shift to fully remote, can the PD days shift to virtual training days to develop robust instruction?
Yeah. And most of the PD, other than the time, we're going to dedicate some time so the teachers understand just sort of the logistics and protocols of moving and safety. All the other PD will be on using the tools that we need to be able to do the work remotely. Because like we talked about, even if in a hybrid, kids have to have some remote tools. So, and that's a hope. And if the surge returns, as some professionals and doctors say it may happen, we will have had some FaceTime with students in the beginning of the year that prepared us for what that looks like. But the majority of professional development will focus on what we need to do in a remote instruction. So even our assessments can be done remotely. Certainly the elementary literacy assessments in K-6, most of those can be done remotely, and our iReady can, in theory, be done remotely too, because it's done on a computer. So
absolutely, and we have that piece built in, like you said, and I think for everyone to realize, we have 4 days of PD. We're using 11. We have 3. So if we do end up shifting, that buys us time. Like we have those 3 days in the bank that we can use them. Although
we have actually flexible days to use if we make a shift somewhere. Yep.
Absolutely. All right, Mr. Conway. Hey, thank you so much. I appreciate it. I know it's been an interesting 5-6 months for us, and every day, it doesn't matter what day it is, we're plugging away. So I appreciate you coming on board with us tonight, and I appreciate
you. I'm going to try to get to the beach tomorrow.
Yeah, good luck with that. Good luck. Okay, so appreciate that. And now we're going to get into our final set of questions here. And we're going to bring back Ms. Buteri, who's hopefully she'll remember this time. Ms. Buteri, you're not going to be on mute this time, are you?
Nope.
I noticed there was a little pause. All right, and then let's get Mr. Conant back in here. He's always, so far, Mr. Conant, so far early on in your tenure, very energetic. Gotta love that. And then we'll bring Ms. Trotta back in. So thank you all for returning, because we've got some more questions. And this is a free-for-all. One of the questions that came up, and you all were part of trying to make decisions about those individual school at a full capacity, a full hybrid. So this question, I think, comes up because at the time we didn't have clarity, but when students are in the building, are we using the 3 feet or 6 feet for distancing?
We are using 6 feet.
That's right. And does can anybody here tell me where the 3 feet came from, that 3 feet concept came from?
Was it Europe?
Actually, it might have been. That 3 foot is what all the schools had to stage and create for the feasibility studies. So that's when we have those pictures when the schools, in our schools, they went in, they put desks 3 feet apart so we could see what that would look like. And that's where we ran into the problems. But yes, 6 feet. 6 feet is the answer. And that's almost, that's like a minimum of 6 feet, because at 50%, Mr. Cohen, Mr. Pateri, in your schools with 50%, they can be, it's at least 6 feet they'll be apart. Is that
Yeah,
right?
they could absolutely be 6 feet apart. I mean, when we were doing the feasibility study, Jim Day and I set up, well, Jim Day did, not me, and Tim Tanny and our
He's not
custodian.
here. You could have taken the credit.
He might be listening. I think probably did. And Tim Tanny and our custodian actually set up the classrooms using the 3 feet. It really didn't look much different. I mean, there were no, there was the teacher desk in there. We had to move some furniture, but it really didn't look much different than a typical classroom.
Sure.
So it just wasn't a safe enough model for our students. But with the 6 feet, we now have been setting up the classrooms in that way. And when I go in to look at those classrooms, I'm like, okay, this makes sense. This looks okay to me. And so, yes, we will be able to make the 6 feet work in most spaces. There are a couple of grade levels where we have a little bit larger class sizes. So we may have to move some classrooms into a different setting. For example, we might have to move like a 5th or a 6th grade classroom into our STEAM room or something like that, just to give a little more space to make the 6 feet work. But for most grade levels, it does work.
That's so 6 feet. And Mr. Cohen, I know you guys ran through that same exercise, 3 feet versus 6 feet.
We did. We set up the classroom side by side. One with the 3 foot and then one with the 6 foot. But at the middle school level, we do our class size is right around 18 or so, 20. So that hybrid is going to allow us to spread out beyond 6 feet. So I think we're in pretty good shape there. We're also looking at the side doors of connecting rooms. We went through the other day the map of the school, looking at some room changes to look at getting. Our science teachers are kind of on an island by themselves in a science area, but we did some moves, made some room moves to make sure that our teams are solid together. If they're not connecting doors, make sure they're across the hall from one another. But we're really aiming on utilizing those connecting classroom doors as much as possible to keep those hallways clear, and then be able to monitor how kids are getting into the classes, the next class, based on where they're going. So we're looking at definitely looking at the map and studying the map, and we definitely made some moves that we think are going to make it a whole lot easier to do.
Yeah, and I'm glad you guys both did that, because I know for Ms. Buteri, some of your classrooms at Bagnell are smaller classrooms than what were typically a standard classroom. And I know my old class.
I was going to say class sizes of 18 at the middle school. Lucky you. We have.
I was going to say that too.
A little bit higher at the elementary school.
The elementary, yeah, and where else?
Yeah.
In seventh grade, and our 8th grade is a little bit larger, but our 7th grade is right around 18,
okay.
18 to 20. So,
and I'll mention also that, so Ms. Pateri, you had those small. Sorry, when I say not student numbers, but just physical size of the classroom.
Yeah, our classrooms are a little bit smaller than at, like, say, the Page School. So I know that
really big one, right?
Yeah, they're not going to have to move any classes to any other locations, and we might just need there. Like I said, there's a couple grade levels that have higher numbers, so we might have to move some classrooms. But we're also not accounting for any of those families. There are going to be families who choose to homeschool. Yeah. There are going to be families who choose to do the full remote learning. So at least a couple at each grade level. So and we're not talking the difference of 10 students. It's the difference between 12 students and 10 students.
Sure.
We could fit into a room.
Yeah,
so
sure. Yeah, and I got to tell you, so even I know over at the high school, in my old classroom, Mr. Seymour and the team there, they put together a list of all the classrooms with the at 3 feet and 6 feet. And my old classroom, the science classroom I taught in, that I was a student in as well, those desks are fixed, and even at 6 feet, they could still fit 15 students in it. So. And that it was one of the smaller classrooms that's in that building. So that's a good sign to say that we can do at least 6 feet. Mr. Cohen, now you mentioned those numbers, but so we're talking about how big your class is going to be. Then you guys, how many people if we're at 50%, and there's asterisks on that as well, right? Because I think there may be instances where we have teachers whose children are coming on a daily basis. So how big do you anticipate the classes to be on Tuesday when the 50% are in? How many kids are going to be there in the class?
I'm anticipating about a dozen, because when we look at, certain, special education students and that may have to come every day, they might add one or two students to the class every day. So, if we take that 20 let's say, and cut it in half to 10, add a couple more students that might attend every day. So we're looking at about probably a dozen students per class.
Ms. Pateri, can you check Mr. Conan on his math there? We said earlier we had like 15 kids or 14 kids in a class.
He's increasing the number.
It's artificial.
I felt bad because you look at that small 7th grade class, so I kind of felt bad. But
Ms. Pateri, when you're
our highest class sizes, if we did not do the hybrid, we would have 25 students per class. That's our highest class size. So like I said, obviously, split A, B, it ends up being about a dozen as well. And we will have a couple families at least do the remote learning or homeschool. So I would say our highest class size would be about 12. And then some of our class sizes are going to be around 8 or 9.
Yep. Yeah. So I think if your parents hearing that, it's fabulous. I know one of the questions I had asked a lot of folks when we were fully remote, I said, if you can go back for, we were talking about this is back in the spring, and maybe it'd be great if we were able to get back for just one day. And this is when we didn't know what was going to happen in May and June. And, immediately the response is, well, who cares? One day, that's useless, blah, blah, blah. So I just stopped and I said, if you're in your house, if you could send your children to school for one day, you wouldn't want to do that? Yeah, I would. Yeah, of course. So now here we have an option where we have them for potentially 2 days. And 2 days with, we look at most instances, a max of 12, 13 kids max in a class, and as little as, like you said, Ms. Pateri, 8, 9 in some instances. Those are really nice numbers. And again, we talked about this before, the social emotional component, and teachers in small numbers being able to assess where kids are at that point. That's really important. This next question has to do with lunches, and I know we haven't finalized all of this yet, but we have a lot of ideas. So who would like to talk about lunch? How will lunches work?
Maybe I can speak to the elementary school first. So we were originally considering having lunches in the classroom, but with the hybrid model and just the size of our cafeteria, we actually can fit students like in an entire grade level in a safe way into our cafeteria. So if that is what the elementary principals choose to go with, we can fit a grade level at a time. Typically in years, last year, historically, we would have 2 grade levels at a time, sometimes each, but we've worked it out with our kitchen manager that we can minimize that to just 1 grade level at a time. So the students will be 6 feet apart while they're eating in the cafeteria, so we can make that work. So although it hasn't been finalized yet, we're thinking that we probably will have students go into the cafeteria for lunchtime.
And there's an obvious question that comes with that. That's great. So I guess in your instance, 3rd grade goes into the cafeteria, 3rd and 4th grade, they go into the cafeteria, they eat, and then 5th and 6th grade or 5th grade's next. Something has to happen in between, though. I heard Dr. Jarvis mention this before. So
sanitizing the tables.
Yeah. So how does that typically, even in a regular, I think in most of your regular days, things get wiped down after lunches.
We wipe down things after every lunch anyways. I'm sure that there will be additional protocols put in place, but definitely everything will be sanitized. Not only the lunch tables, which are typically the only thing sanitized, but all surfaces. For example, when the student walks through to get their lunch, all of those surfaces will be cleaned. They're not going to be, students aren't going to be able to put in their code like they do every day. I'm sure we're thinking that the student will probably just, say it verbally, and then the staff can put in the code for the student so they're not touching the keypad, things like that. We'll also have additional practices of hand washing right before they eat and right after they eat, things like that.
And what about over at the middle school? Because I know, with your 6 people in a class that you got there on average, you probably can fit the entire school in the cafeteria. But no, seriously, what's that looking like in the caf for lunch?
Yeah, well, we're looking at the caf it's a very large space. Obviously, it's one of the largest spaces we have in the school. But we're looking at the way the tables are set up, and they're fixed benches or fixed seats. So we're looking at possibly maybe changing out some of those tables because that kind of breaks the the protocol, all students facing kind of the right direction. So in order to do the 6 feet, we'd have to do more of a W, and that can't happen with under the regulations. So looking at putting maybe some different types of tables in there, because now that we're using desks in all the classrooms, we have some tables available. Try to maximize that space. We're looking at possibly have an overflow area across from the cafeteria where students can go. But we're currently looking at we think we have enough space in the cafeteria. It's just a matter of looking at furniture, maybe removing some of those cafeteria tables and have those fixed seats, just because those are uncomfortable anyway. But also you can't get that 6 feet in between.
Yeah, absolutely. So Ms. Trotta, you look at your screen. Is this an important question for you?
Absolutely. People want to know if their children are going to get to meet their teacher face to face, and that's a huge question. Are they going to get any interaction with their teachers, even in a remote model?
I can tell you, I have my youngest daughter. She's going to be in the 4th grade this upcoming year, and she says all the time now, I don't want to go. I don't want to stay at home. I want to see my teacher. I want to be with my teacher. And I know that's just one representative. It's mostly she probably doesn't want to be near me, which is why she wants to go to school. But I think this is a big deal for a lot of our students, and that question gets asked unsolicited, I think, by my daughter, but I know that's probably replicated across. So how is this going to happen? How? And I know this is like a watermelon of a question because we've covered it now a couple of times. So how is this going to happen?
I think certainly it becomes a little more of a challenge during the if we're going to go hybrid remote to meet teachers face to face, if you will. But I think with the hybrid and having those small numbers in classes, I mean, the teacher might not be able to get as close as in the past, but certainly there will be opportunities for staff to work with students. Maybe it's from another end of a table, using a Chromebook, maybe it's looking over their shoulder from a distance. But with the hybrid opportunity, we move some of that furniture we don't need. It creates additional lanes for teachers to move throughout the classroom, checking on student progress and things like that. I just think it makes it a whole lot more. The classroom becomes a little more easier to maneuver when you remove some of the desks and you have half the students. So I think it's going to look differently for sure, but it still can be done. We have to maintain safety at all times.
Yep, absolutely. Ms. Butera.
I think that as we transition the students and we use that 25%, move from the 25% to the 50% model, not only are we going to be going over procedures and protocols with the kids, this is how you have to wash your hands and this is how you have to walk down the hallway. That's going to be a huge opportunity for students to get to know their students on a really, really deep level. I mean, I hope we don't ever, I hate to say this, I hope we don't ever have class sizes this small again, because that would mean something like this is happening. And I hope it never happens again. But that's one silver lining, that, teachers are never going to have class sizes of 8, 9, or 10. So, and students as well. So I'm sure parents probably picture the classrooms as, they are standalone desks. Our kids are typically used to tables at the elementary school level, and they are all facing the same direction. But really, when you walk into those classrooms, they look like the typical elementary classroom, just with much less furniture and much less desks. But just being in that environment, although the kids and the teachers will have masks on, if there's 8 or 9 students in the classroom, like, there can be rich conversations. There can be, a lot of time spent on restorative practice circles and morning meeting and things like that, and just getting to know each other on a much deeper level. So I just think the fact that the class sizes are going to be low and even lower to begin with the 25%, I think that's going to be a huge opportunity. And I met with elementary principals earlier this morning, and we were already talking about what we can do even prior to that. So kids are going to start getting, and parents are going to start getting antsy. They want to know. I've gotten many emails. They typically already know who they're going to have for a teacher. They don't even know that yet. So
in a normal year, you tell them that at the end of the previous year, right?
So we always used to do it at the end of the school year, last day. And then we changed it so that we could have a step-up day. So we notify them a couple days prior to the end of the school year, and then they're able to have the step-up day and meet their new teacher before going off to summer vacation. So that's a really nice activity that we added the past couple of years. So we were talking this morning as elementary principals what we can do before that first day of school to just get kids comfortable, just maybe some fun videos. I know that I think the Sweetser and Donahue School, the students who moved from like 2nd grade to 3rd grade, they already did some sort of activity for that transition. So, and then, you know, videos were made and we did some things at Bagnell. We sent it out to all kindergarten parents like we did. I can't think. Oh, the burning questions videos. So
Yes,
I did one,
that's right.
so some of our staff did, and then our kindergarten teachers all made one as well together. So just showing videos like that to the kids, so the kids can see the teachers' faces and just get to know some fun facts about the teachers is also another
It's
option.
really important. It's again, I go back to what Bill said yesterday. It's about building that community, building those relationships. It's going to be so
and then, you know,
so important. Yeah.
yeah, and so too, you know, the 7th grade is the largest transition these students are going to have in their Pentucket school careers. So really, in those first 4 days, you know, it's almost like it's a refresh button. It's a restart button. You know, all the students can have a fresh start. Our staff has a fresh start. So we need to really, you know, hone in on what those 4 days are going to look like. Yes, we have to go through protocols. We have to go through procedures to make sure safety is the number one concern. But we also want to we want to hook. We want to hook these get the big hook into these kids. You know, starting day one. Particularly at the middle school level when they are making that largest academic really transition of their school careers.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely true. All right. So obviously this one, so this question stems more from, I condensed it down here, but that need, we know young children, like that social interaction is so important. So here we are, hybrid model, 50%. What's allowed? Like, what's going to be allowed between students?
So it depends. You're not going to see kids outside playing Foursquare anymore, or Red. Do they play Red Rover? Red Rover? I'm not sure. Foursquare is big. I know that, but they're not going to be playing those games where they're having like physical interactions with each other. We do have play structures outside, but we are renovating those play structures, so there probably won't even be opportunities for students. They wouldn't have even been able to play on the play structure outside anyways, but they are going to have recess time. It's just going to look different. We're going to have to really work with the students on what they are allowed to do at school. Lunch, like we were saying earlier, lunch is going to be, we still have to follow those directives of everyone's facing the same way. So lunch is typically the biggest time for kids to socialize at school, and we just have to kind of rethink things that's not going to be the case anymore. It's going to be to get the kids in and get them fed, and then I'm really looking at things differently in the way that social interactions will happen at different points in the day. So I'm picturing, small group art classes outside, maybe a drawing class where kids can be outside, socially distanced, and they're all sitting in a circle, on the grass, and they're all like participating in a drawing lesson. PE classes can take place outside. So a lot of those smaller group specialist classes and smaller group classes, even inside the gen ed classroom, is going to be the main point of social interaction.
You completely left out.
Yeah.
I think it's still okay. What about red light, green light? That is always a
question. Yeah, I was playing that just the other day.
Ooh, yeah. You were playing it the other day. That's good.
Yeah.
Yeah. But red light, green light, we just can't tag the person at the end. You'd have to just make sure there's an end line or something. And I think
I haven't seen Red Rover in a while, so I don't know if that's.
It's kind of dangerous.
It can get.
We better have the kids on board because some of those rules I don't quite remember. Red light, green light.
No.
And mother may I and things like that.
Oh, yeah.
You can put everybody in the end line and have them move forward. But I think if I'm remembering correctly, outside, particularly for PE, and those protocols, and that's why it's so important to have someone like Ms. Brady Lozier, and as we go through these, I think it's 12 feet outside without the mask, but I think they can certainly wear their mask, and like you said, they can use some of that equipment if it's available. And right now, you have some construction. So our final question, big one for a lot of our, if you, why don't you guys ask me this question so I can be the bearer of news.
Dr. B, what is the status of the before and after school program?
Ms. Pateri, thank you so much for asking that question. This really is a big question that so many people want to know, because we have so many people that participate in the before and after school program. And what we know is that our focus has been on getting children ready for school and going back to school. Just based on everything we've talked about since we started right at 6 o'clock, it's before and after school program right now is on postponement. We are not going to open up the before and after school program. And a big reason why is because we're going to be sanitizing all these spaces that were typically occupied by the before and after school programs. You'd have to do a selection about who's allowed to come, even within the 50%. And even if you did a lottery of something, some nature like that, a sanitized space is now going to have a bunch of children from a bunch of, they're not in cohorts, like they're blending now into a space. And then when they leave, that space is immediately going to have to be somehow cleaned by somebody. And then these children are going to be moving back into that space. So logistically, it's an absolute nightmare. We want to be able to get there eventually. But the first thing we need to do is make sure we can run this hybrid effectively and efficiently. And once we see how that's going, then we'll move to that next point of doing a before and after school program. It's too much of a risk to run a before and after school program right now. And I would love to do it. It just at this point in time does not make a lot of sense when we're trying to keep things as structured as we possibly can. So I'm sorry for that bad news.
That's the last question.
So I know I would give, I typically like to do like questions that people can win prizes or something like that. But yeah,
there's no prize.
Say it again. It's depressing.
I said there's no prize.
No, there's no prize. I will make mention to everybody who's watching. If you put a question in, there were 100 and I think some odd 100. Last I checked, it was like 123. What you just saw were the most commonly asked questions. So questions that could ask, questions that were similar, the ones that had thumbs up. Special education may not have had many thumbs ups. And the reason why we selected those because not all of you that may participate in service have students in special ed. So we picked those questions that had the highest number for questions that related to special education. So don't fear not, though. This is not going to be, I think you all know, there's not going to be the only time we do one of these. We will be back, and we'll have more questions, opportunities for you to ask questions. And I think it's going to be better for you to, because now for our audience, you'll have more of an idea of where we're heading. And hopefully you do at this point. You have the plan to read, and you'll get more information from us. And as you get that information, the next time we do this, I think the questions will be a little more specific to what is that's going on. And as Mr. Conway said, he and I just received today the information on the virtual school option that we just got today, and that's it looks like a good viable option. But that just happened. So as we get that information out to you, you're going to have more questions about, is that a potential option for my child if I decide I'm going to be fully remote? Ms. Buteri, thank you very much. Ms. Trana, thank you so much. I'm going to bring in all our other, Mr. Conant, excellent job. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Let's see, we got Mr. Conway. Mr. Conway, thank you very much for coming on. Mr. Haddon, appreciate you taking the time. Mr. Danforth, fabulous job. I appreciate it. And one of our big and most critical stars of the show, Ms. Brady Lozier. I can't thank you all enough. And I know Dr. Jarvis, like I said, he had to leave. But thank you so much for being here. I know it was a big chunk of your night, but I think it was. I appreciate you taking the time because it is such an important topic that you guys were able to answer these questions that came at us. So thank you. Any final words out of anybody?
I miss everyone, and thank you so much for your patience. I know this has been extremely difficult, so thank you for bearing with us, and stay safe.
Well said. Well said, Ms. Terry. Everyone, have a wonderful night, and we'll be in touch soon. Take care, everybody.
Bye.
All right.
Be well.
Be